one day in Gaza. And so we're here today, selecting a candidate. The leaders that you will see talking to you from across this country, who have been actively working and campaigning and abandoned Biden since October, will talk to you about their work and their struggles and their need for help. And we've come to this point today on June 13th to ask the question to the public: who should abandon Biden endorse to be the flag bearer for which we then use that person and their campaign with joy and with love to deploy the strategy of punishing the president and then getting credit? Is it Sister Stein? Is it Brother West? Is it Sister de la Cruz? And so that is the question that lies before us and why we are here together. And next week, we have a great conversation. We've heard from the candidates. We want you to come and we will select from you. Please feel free to share if you want to join and speak about why we should support a specific candidate. And so that will be on June 23rd. Help is needed, and people ask why? Why? If we really are already abandoning Biden in our communities. The point is, a lot of people don't know that abandon Biden and actually abandoning the president can lead to major fruits and dividends. And so we ask everyone to share this message, because people have bought into the lesser of two evils rhetoric, but they don't realize that we could transform this country by punishing a president so long as it's clear that we were the ones, and that was our numbers behind it, that we were the ones who issued this credible threat. Otherwise, the strategy wouldn't work. And so we need to mobilize the point here is that many will not come out because many have become disenfranchised and apathetic because of the terror that they see on TV. But the truth is that would make us fulfill the wishes of those who violate human rights. And so we ask each of you to speak out, to campaign, to come to our events, and to donate. Please volunteer, abandonbiden24.com/volunteer. And please donate, abandonbiden24.com/donate. Isolation, children under siege, our beloved elderly, displaced, no water or food, perpetual death and fear chases after our parents and children, and the hospitals with maimed and injured people, and the hopeless who seek a place without bombardment. How could we be the ones who fundraise oppression? We come back and we fundraise in good conscience and we build new hospitals. But we, just one small community like Muslim Americans, among many of our allies, who spend countless dollars to support people who suffer. $4.3 billion Muslim Americans spent alone in 2021, just in charitable causes. We need so far, so little to ensure this president is punished, to deal and cut the root causes of those things we fundraise in the billions. And the fundraising help we need are for mailers and phone banking and text blasting and emails and ads and canvassers and door knockers and transportation to polls for all those people who are apathetic and just need a helping hand on November 5th. And so we invite you all to the gala in Michigan, where Brother Sami Hamdi and Abid Ayoub and Muhammad al-Masmari and Khalid Baydoun will be talking. And anything, any amount can help. People ask, what will we do after November 5th? The struggle continues. The struggle continues. We have an organization that's launched Abandon Biden. It's called the Civil Rights Alliance for America. We believe civil rights should be in all foreign policy, the Uyghurs and the Rohingya, and the end of autocracy in Egypt and Arabia, the devastation in China that's taking place, that all Americans should participate in this movement. We are guided by the light of Martin Luther King. who fought, the one who's typically remembered today is the one who fought for voting rights in Selma, the one who wrote in the Birmingham jail. Our beloved Martin Luther King is often forgotten for his speaking out against the Vietnam War, an international broad intervention that causes atrocities. We're guided by the light of that Martin Luther King at Abandon Biden, and we ask our fellow Americans to join us. Civil Rights Alliance for America will continue the work after November 5th. It doesn't end. It could be 4 years of struggle as we work hard to transform the Democratic Party and to bring Republicans towards declaring peace and the end of occupation and the end of sending military aid to Palestine and nations across this world who suffer because of our tax dollars. So please join and support Abandon Biden. This will be a strategy that's effective. We must persist. Today, we are here with people of conscience and our fellow Americans, candidates who stand for good and for justice. We want their platform to be heightened. We want you to ask the questions that you feel are most deeply impacting your life, that can make you make the decision for you to feel the passion to come out to vote. Vote, vote, vote. It's a word of justice. The beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that the greatest martyr is Hamza, and the next is someone who spoke out against a ruler who was unjust and then was killed. This religion is based on justice, and we are here together with our allies from all backgrounds, African Americans, Gen Z, women, Latinos, progressives, libertarians, to end the brutal autocracy. Join us so that we could depose the autocrat in the White House.
Thank you so much for that powerful introduction. I would like to ask our co-chairs from Pennsylvania and Florida to briefly introduce themselves and what they've been doing.
Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Rabiul Chowdhury. I'm the co-chair of Abandon Biden Pennsylvania chapter. Probably the battleground as you look at the poll, both candidates spending heavily here in the great state of Pennsylvania. On the primary, we have tried something different. We have tried anything but Biden, which included uncommitted, writing no Joe, or anything but Biden, where we have seen people express their feeling towards their third-party candidate, like Sister West, Brother West, Sister Jill, and Claudia, and others. On the day of the primary, we have made over 70,000 robocalls. We are not only active in the political engagement, but we are also heavily involved in the civic engagement front as well. From the protest to the getting candidates on the ballot. Our volunteers from Pittsburgh to Philly actively involved in getting some of the sophisticated third-party candidates on the ballot as we speak. With that being said, I'm going to pass it on to the co-chair of Florida.
Okay, assalamu alaikum everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and joining everybody today. My name is Lubna Hamad. I am the co-chair of the state of Florida. I helped launch the campaign back in November, right before Thanksgiving in the state of Florida. And ever since then, we've been trying to work increasing voter registration in the state among our communities and our allies who will be abandoning Biden, and as well as working to support the different civic engagements, such as supporting encampments, liberation zones, and so on in different universities, and going out in protests, and we did have Kamala Harris come and visit us a few weeks back. So we were there present in that protest to make our voices heard that we will be abandoning Biden this upcoming election. Thank you, and I'll pass it on to the next Florida representative.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Amna Ayan. First of all, I want to say there is no other morally correct decision besides abandoning Biden. I'm Amna Ayan, co-chair of Florida, and I just want to talk for a few minutes about some of the activities that we are doing here in Florida. We're working very hard to promote lots of civic engagement through voter education, voter registration. We also have advocates in different cities engaged with their city commissioners trying to pass a ceasefire. We are also keen on running and supporting our own candidates who share our values. I would like to see our Muslim community more in the business of making laws, not just fighting laws. Recently, the abandoned Biden campaign of Florida, alhamdulillah, we were able to endorse a candidate, Jen Perlman, for Congress for District 25. We have fundraised for her. We're campaigning for her. We're canvassing. We're going to do everything we can to get her across the finish line. She is running again. She is running on an end.
And
Yes. Can I go on? Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I think that was a mistake. Please go on, Sister Amna.
Yeah, well, Jennifer Perlman is running on an anti-Zionist campaign platform, first of its kind. It is awesome to see that. If she wins, she will be defeating a 21-year incumbent who is heavily supported by AIPAC. She will be defeating Debbie Wasserman-Schultz. So this would be a huge win for the Muslim community, and it will be a huge win for our movement in the Abandon Biden campaign. I would like to invite everyone to look her up. Please go to Jen, Jen, 2024.org. And if you are in District 25 in Florida, please go out and vote for her August 20th. Thank you for your time. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Thank you for sharing our co-chairs from Pennsylvania and Florida and all the work that you're doing in your states for Palestine and for the oppressed. We're getting into the main section of our event, and I am in the middle of working through some technical difficulties, but I am going to be asking Sister Masuda, who is an operations manager, to just give a brief introduction of Claudia. She is in the meeting, she's hearing everything, but I'm having trouble locating her to give her access to open her mic and to speak. So we're going to work on that. And in the meantime, Sister Masuda from our operations department is going to just give a brief introduction about her.
Thank you, Sister Salima. Hello, everyone. Our first speaker is running as a presidential candidate for the Socialism and Liberation Party. She is a mother, a popular educator and theologian born in South Bronx, who has spent her life organizing for the justice of working people at home and to end the U.S. empire abroad. I would like to welcome Claudia de la Cruz to the panel. Claudia will be interviewed by our co-chair of Florida, Abdullah Sheikh. Abdullah has been an active member of the Abandon Biden campaign since its inception. Please welcome Abdullah to facilitate the interview with Claudia de la Cruz.
Thank you, Sister Masuda. Assalamu alaikum and welcome everybody for joining. Sister Salima, I just wanted to check with you before real quick. Have we been able to have Claudia with full audio and mic?
Yes, I figured it out. So she's ready to start. I'm gonna allow her to speak, and
Sure.
she's gonna change her name. I think it's coming up as Khalid, but she's here. Alhamdulillah.
Okay, Jazakallah. So just a quick intro into who I am. As Sister Masuda mentioned, I'm a co-chair of Abandoned Biden, Florida. As far as kind of my political activism history, I've been engaged at least with varying degrees of campaigns. So I've worked on the Bernie Sanders 2016 and 2020 campaign. I've also worked on some local campaigns like Andrew Gillum for governor in Florida, and then also some local Florida congressional and state campaigns. And I've been very passionate about the cause of Palestine for the last 24 years. So that being said, I think a lot of us who are here today, we're here because of the genocide that we're seeing unfolding before our eyes. But one part of the genocide and the instigation of this genocide that's often missed is sometimes the economical sort of instigation of this genocide. And there are some interesting implications with respect to unfettered capitalism and how that plays a role in not just this genocide, but also in the oppression of abroad. So I think that's kind of an interesting take that is not often sort of taken into account. So with our presidential candidate, Claudia de la Cruz, I would love to welcome her here and really would like to understand the genesis of your political philosophy as far as your youth and sort of visiting Cuba. I understand that you, at a very young age, visited Cuba. So kind of wanted to understand, how did that shape your political philosophy, your worldview, and how did that shape your activism going forward?
Well, thank you first and foremost for having me. I appreciate you having me in the space. I don't know if should I go ahead with an intro first, or
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us a
right
little
into
bit
the
about yourself,
question?
your background. Absolutely. I think did a little bit of intro, but I wanted to give you more time to, tell us about yourself, your history. So that's how I purposely was asking about your sort of experience in Cuba. But yeah, absolutely. Let us know.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of my experience in Cuba, it opened up my eyes to what's possible. I think that it's important for us to understand that everything that we need, there is abundance to be able to allow us to have. And unfortunately, Cuba has been under the plight of US imperialism. And so what Cuba helped me understand was precisely what US imperialism doesn't allow for socialist projects to develop into. Cuba has had the ability within, the grip of US imperialism and capitalists to be able to provide housing for people, provide healthcare, provide education, and also provide a level of solidarity internationally that is quite important if we're trying to build a new society. And so Cuba showed me what socialism could look like, especially in the core of empire. No one is actually, imperialist towards the United States. The United States is the hegemon, is the empire. And so it has abundant resources to be able to provide for its people everything they need. And so that was my experience at 17. But I definitely did want to start by thanking the Abandoned Biden campaign for allowing me to be in conversation with the community, with everyone that has tuned in. I want to appreciate Dr. Hassan and his intro and grounding, because I really do believe that this is beyond the electoral moment that we are experiencing now, that this is about building a movement that responds to the power of the people. And that is specifically and particularly what our campaign is about. So I'll share a little bit, of what our understanding is of the moment, and also share a little bit more about the campaign itself and me. Lastly, I think it's important to understand that the current genocide against the people of Palestine, that the US war criminals like Biden and Blinken are funding and supporting this genocide, has revealed so much of the nature of the economic and political system in which we live, which is basically some of what you were trying to get at. It has shown us that it is capitalism and US imperialism that are at stake here. And that is why they are unwilling to stop this genocide. If it were not for the US, its ruling class and its politicians, the colonial state of Israel will not be able to carry a 76-year-old occupation, numerous ethnic cleansing campaigns, because it's been more than 8 months. And the apartheid system that the colonial state of Israel has upheld, all of this could not be possible if not for US imperialist and capitalist powers. And the past 8 months of attacks and genocide would be impossible if not by US imperialism. And so I think it's important to be able to have the campaign that you all have launched with the Abandon Biden, because it's a way of bringing consciousness to people that Biden is supporting an economic, political project that is intrinsically connected to the plight and colonialism of the Palestinian people. And we believe that is a crucial moment to go beyond what we're told is politically possible by the corporate duopoly and the dictatorship of the billionaires. And finally, abandon Biden, yes, and abandon the economic and political system that consistently and aggressively continues to attack the working class and poor people in this country and across the globe. Dr. Hassam spoke about, genocide, and he spoke about in the context of each corner of the globe. Well, we are anti-genocide, but at the core of our politics is anti-imperialism. We're against colonialism and occupation, and we defend the total liberation of Palestine. And going back to your initial question, Cuba has taught the solidarity across the world to the extent that for whatever resources that they have, they're willing to share. When I went to Cuba not too long ago, there was a brigade of Palestinian medical students who were studying medicine in Cuba for free. And that is what socialism does. In comparison to what US imperialism, the wealthiest country in the world, it is denying the possibility of babies, mothers, sisters, daughters, families to be able to thrive in their own land because of US imperial interest and capitalism. And for as long as those root problems exist, genocides, ethnic cleansing campaigns, all sorts of destruction will come to everyone all across the globe. And our campaign is precisely tackling the root of the problem. We have no time to waste. The planet deserves better. The people of the globe deserve better. And we're promoting the possibility for that. We're engaging people all across this country, letting people know that they don't need to disengage, that we need to engage actively in creating the power of our communities, not only to be heard, but to make decisions over the political and economic life of this country. And we don't do that with electoral politics alone. We do that by building a movement.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you're sort of honing in on imperialism, and I guess this unfettered capitalist system is very interesting in kind of how it plays into the genocide that we're seeing today. I am kind of curious to dig in a little bit deeper, especially with your unique insights on with your party, obviously the Socialist Party, in terms of how do you think unfettered capitalism has, well, first of all, potentially started and or exacerbated the genocide that we're seeing today?
I mean, again, we have to understand how historically the United States has served as a collaborator in the displacement, in the ethnic cleansing, in the brutalization of the Palestinian people, and I would dare say people across the Middle East and across the globe. I think we need to understand that in Europe, we have, I say we, but the United States government, whether the administration has been Democrats or Republicans, they have NATO, which has advanced war in Europe and is planning to advance it towards Asia, specifically China. We have AFRICOM in Africa, which has basically served for the further colonization of the African countries and the plight and misery and poverty of the people in Africa. There is a Southern Command in this continent. And then there's Israel as a colonial power that was created by the United States, that is financed by the United States to maintain the Palestinian people under its boot. And so if we have our lenses well put and we understand what US imperialism is, we also are able to understand its connection, its inherent connection to the colonial state of Israel. And this is precisely why Biden is unwilling to go back on anything, despite the lack of popularity, despite the majority of the people in this country and around the world isolating Israel, because ultimately his defending what many other of his predecessors have defended. And this is where Biden and Trump are very similar, because they both defend US empire, which is the ruling class, Wall Street Bank, Pentagon, corporations, the US military in all its forms. That is what they are defending. And so anything that is not that, they are very much willing to go against for the sake of their interests. And when we understand that in order for any type of genocide to end, we need to end US capitalism and US imperialism, because that is not the interest of the majority of the people in this country, and is not the interest of the majority of the people in the world. And it will continue to birth genocides in Palestine, in Congo, in Sudan, occupations in Palestine, in Haiti, in Puerto Rico, everywhere and anywhere it puts its boot on the ground, it will choke people out of life. And we need to be able to end it before it ends our lives.
Yeah, I think I'm reminded of a quote. I believe it was Chris Hedges who said famously that quote unquote, third world countries are not poor because they have no resources. They're poor because they have resources that are
That's right.
exploited by colonialist and imperialist powers. It's always interesting to see how that connection is made. Imperialism and colonialist powers, typically the precursor to that is often resources, which obviously is exploited through unfettered capitalistic means. So yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. And that sort of connection, oftentimes I think people miss that. You know, imperialist powers don't go out and colonialize, you know, places in the middle of nowhere that have no resources. I mean, they are very strategic in what they do. So Palestine being, you know, chief among them for a variety of reasons. And now, as you probably have seen, reporting coming out with was $500 billion of gas off the coast of Gaza. Interesting, you know, time to have found these amazing resources off the coast of Gaza. So we are getting a bunch of audience questions coming in. So I'll pose some of the audience questions that we have coming through. So one of them is the fact that, you know, we're talking about Palestine and kind of the horrific crimes we're seeing happening today, but we all know United States presidents, you know, prior, Biden included, and obviously before, and all the different Congress people and senators, we're seeing kind of the naked impact of lobbying groups like AIPAC and their impact on our electoral politics. You know, we made a big fuss about foreign interference when it came to Russia, but apparently AIPAC's foreign interference is A-okay. So one of the questions that are being asked is, what would your campaign do about, I guess, AIPAC or taking on AIPAC? What sort of strategic a campaign perspective do you have on AIPAC? And by the way, side note, I really like your keffiyeh. I didn't know it was a keffiyeh. It took me a second. It's such a colorful keffiyeh. So
Appreciate you. Thank you. Well, I think it's important to, again, to go to the root of the problem. The democracy of this country is a sham. It is a complete sham. We are imposed a corporate duopoly, and the name itself tells us a corporate duopoly. They are at the hands of the billionaires. They are in the hands of corporations. They're in the hands of Wall Street bankers. They are led by militaristic interest. And then there's AIPAC, which does the lobbying work to continue to support the colonial state of Israel. Again, it goes back to its root. What our campaign is saying is that if we are really truly invested in building a democracy, we need to end the dictatorship of the billionaires. And we need to end the dictatorship of groups like AIPAC. And we need to be able to isolate this corporate lobby that happens and actually dismantle it completely. We should be able to have the opportunity as a people to have one person, one vote. Why isn't that a possibility in this country? Why is there an electoral college? Why is there not a parliament? Why is there not a space where different voices are heard and different debates take place about what really matters to the people in the United States? And so in terms of what our campaign is proposing is a complete reorganization of the so-called democracy of this country, is uprooting a democracy that tells us you need to vote for us every 4 years, but denies us the opportunity to decide how our tax dollars are being spent, denies us the opportunity to be able to have a voice in relationship to how much money we're spending on rent, or whether we can and cannot access healthcare. they are always gridlocked when it comes to the most necessary basic things that we as working class people deserve and need. But they're never gridlocked about war and genocide and how many billions or trillions they're going to spend in the US military. And so I think it's important for us to, again, conceptualize it as a larger problem. And in terms of our campaign, we say dismantle all of these unnecessary, undemocratic spaces where the people have no say, and ultimately advance the exploitation, extraction, and the murdering of people, not only here in the United States, but across the globe. So we are totally against AIPAC and the different PACs that lobby against the people and that rule this country ultimately.
Yeah, AIPAC is a symptom, right? It's not the cause, to your point. I mean, lobbying groups in general shouldn't have the power they have. Citizens United, right, kind of opened the floodgates. It was already bad before Citizens United. Citizens United just opening it even further. Your point to Electoral College, by the way, is kind of an interesting one. I think history nerds will maybe kind of be able to address the fact that this, the ability to have sort of direct electoral impact has been shifting throughout the history of the United States. We used to not be able to even elect our own senators. I think people sometimes forget that. I mean, that was something that was also a representative democracy, quote unquote. So, you know, we're able to represent, we're able to elect our own representatives now. We're able to represent our own senators. The question is often asked, why can't we directly elect our own presidents? Why do we still have this electoral college, which I know oftentimes the roots, if you go back to it far enough, usually is based in racism and, you know, bigotry and things like that, which is kind of always interesting. So another question that we're getting asked is around the future of your campaign and the future of all third-party campaigns. So regardless of what happens on November 5th, I think the question that's being asked, overarching question, is how do you see your campaign potentially collaborating, or your movement, if you will, collaborating with these other movements, or do you see them as sort of going forward in their own separate directions?
I think inherently a lot of these movements are going to kind of come together, and we have to be ready for what happens when that takes place. There's nothing in this world, there's nothing in this country that has ever moved without a strong, organized group of conscious people. And so for us, this electoral campaign is a tactic within a larger strategy. As you mentioned earlier, I'm part of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, which is an organization that is multinational, intergenerational, that has presence in over 90 cities across the United States, who are engaged in people, working class people, members who are coming out of work and they get into 6:30, 7 o'clock meetings till 9 p.m. to organize actions around all sorts of fronts of struggle. Our organization is 20 years old. We do work, we've done work around police brutality, against mass incarceration, in support of immigrants, in support of women's rights. I mean, you name it in terms of fronts of struggles, the PSL has been embedded and engaged, immersed in struggle. And so regardless of what happens, November 5th, 2024, we will continue to be immersed in struggle. This is part, again, this electoral campaign is part of a larger strategy, which is to contribute in building a movement of working class people that are anti-imperialist, that are anti-capitalist, and understand the necessity of building a new system that actually responds to the needs of its people and allows for the rest of the world to breathe. And so in terms of what will happen to the campaign will take the form that it had before the electoral campaign came out, which is we will continue to educate, organize, mobilize, agitate, build power within our communities to be able to dismantle the system that continues to deny us the right to live dignified lives.
Yeah, that's a wonderful answer. I mean, a lot of us here that are here today, we're driven. I've met so many people that were maybe politically disengaged prior to October 7th, and now have become extremely politically engaged, obviously seeing the horrific genocide, I would say accelerated genocide, because the genocide has been going on for 76 plus years. But one of the questions that are being asked amongst the audience is, I personally know that the Socialism Liberation Party has been very active at the forefront of Palestinian struggles, but I guess the question is being asked about you personally. I guess, could you kind of describe what your experience has been for the Palestinian movement in general?
Well, I started organizing 30 years ago. And so I've been engaged in, again, internationalist struggles for as long as I've been in movement. One of my first campaigns was precisely around political prisoners in the United States in relationship to the Puerto Rican political prisoners that were being held. And this was at 13 years old. In terms
Oh,
of
wow.
my own relationship, yeah, I'm 43. So I've been in organizing in political work for 30 years. In relationship to Palestine, when the anti-war movement of the early 2000s came about, post 2001, there was a huge split in the anti-war movement. And there were very few people who actually held the flag of Palestine because there was a fear that the anti-war movement would be connected to the word terrorism. And in the midst of that, there were very few of us who held the flag of the Palestinian people and defended the right of Palestinian people to assert their right to live freely. And so, in terms of my relationship with Palestine, I have a long-standing relationship with the Palestinian solidarity movement, not only in the United States, but worldwide. Cuba holds a very dear relationship with the Palestinian people. Again, they have programs to support Palestinian students. They have a Palestinian mission in Cuba because Palestine is recognized. And so, again, in terms of my own experience, since I came into movement at a very young age, I understood the right of the Palestinian people to resist and to fight for their sovereignty. I also understood the relationship of U.S. empire as an immigrant, as a daughter of immigrants myself, the relationship of U.S. empire to colonialism, and in the Palestinian case, the colonial state of Israel, and the illegality, the immorality, the inhumanity of having such type of occupation in Palestinian land. So,
Wait a minute. So you're telling me that fighting for peace and anti-war could be construed as a terrorist sympathizer? I don't think
oh yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard of that one before. I don't
So
know.
now is like, the narrative that people are talking about is very like anti-Zionism is anti-Semitic, right? So that's a big thing now. In the early 2000s, it was, you're defending terrorism. And again, if folks remember 2001, it was the towers. And so there was a huge attack on the Muslim community that came afterwards. And so all of these things, again, I feel like history is important. It's important to think about the different iterations and the different names and the different ways in which empire, capitalism, the ruling class has named resistance struggles, from, civil rights movements to abolitionist movements to the right of Palestinians to resist. It's always been the branding that is no longer working because people are able to see with their own eyes the brutality and violence of U.S. empire and the colonialist state of Israel.
The sheer projection, to be honest with you, on the other side has been breathtaking. Like, every accusation is a confession. It's crazy. It's, you're fighting against a war, the military industrial complex. You're fighting for peace, but yet you're the terrorist. I mean, you probably maybe remember the USC valedictorian. She was, she actually created a class for teaching about peace, and they canceled her valedictorian speech because they thought it was a security threat. I'm like, what Orwellian world are we living in right now, where the person advocating for peace is being considered having quote unquote terroristic, sympathies and things like that? It's wild.
Abdullah, we're living in a world of fear. They are fearful because they see the power of organized people. And I think we need to be able to acknowledge that and hold that really, really close to our hearts. They fear it. They fear the fact that Gaza has broken through and actually has had the ability of bringing different sectors of struggle together. You have students, you have labor, you have people that are doing abolitionist work, making the connections around policing here and the military forces in Palestine. There's a lot of connections that are being made that are threatening, that are very threatening to the very structure of this capitalist society. And so, of course, they're going to, find ways of misleading, misinforming. And thankfully, we live in a world where technology social media, on time witnessing is allowing for people to wake up. And the connections of a struggling class here, struggling working class here, saying, wait a minute, how is it that they have $14 billion in addition to the $4 billion that they give Israel every year to continue this genocide, but they can't solve the housing crisis. They can't solve the healthcare crisis. They can't eradicate student debt. People are making those connections. And so what they are seeing is the possibility of a unified struggle. And that is very, very threatening to them.
I could not agree more. Yeah, I mean, you have them on their toes when they're gaslighting pretty much every day. So speaking of gaslighting, one of the things, the common refrains we always hear is, if we don't vote for Biden, we're gonna get Trump, which I thought was very interesting. And somebody actually had made a video of all the different things they were scared of Trump. They said, number one, what is he gonna do about immigration? Trump is gonna, be even worse than he was on immigration than during his first term. And of course, now we've seen what Biden just recently did with regards to immigration, to which, it's interesting, like everything that they're afraid of with Trump, Biden is either doing or has already done. Another thing about privacy rights. So people oftentimes complain, oh, Trump is going to take away your privacy. We're seeing right now what's happening with campus protests and even with online censorship. So it's like all the things you're afraid of with Trump is already happening. The analogy of the frog being boiled slowly, I think people don't really understand that. So to that end, I guess, getting past voters' fear of this sort of duopoly and breaking through that duopoly, if you had a closing argument to make for your campaign to break through that duopoly and to give your campaign a chance, what do you think that closing argument would be?
I would say that abolition of slavery, which hasn't been finalized in this country, did not happen with people who were fearful. The right to access voting rights in this country did not happen with people who were cowardly. It happened through the courageous collective act of people who decided that they had the right to exist and they had the right to be seen and heard. And I think we're still in that struggle today. I think we are actually in a more urgent space than back then to be able to transform society from its root. Biden and Trump are a product of capitalism. No third party created them. Capitalism created them. And we cannot fight fascism, which is basically the threat of Trump, with someone like Biden. And actually, we cannot fight that threat with the Democratic Party that is more willing to concede to genocide and more willing to concede to conservative politics than to actually allow any type of progressive advancement within the party. We need to build our own instruments for working class people, by working class people, with working class interest in our hearts, in our minds, in our politics. And what we're asking people to do is to engage in building movement. Engage in building movement, engage in building a political instrument that is representative, but that you also have participation in building. And when we're talking about electoral politics in this country, is the legitimizing. Under capitalism, is legitimizing. Who will exploit us next? Who will launch the next war next? Who will launch the next genocide next? And I think this is a great opportunity for us to be able to vote with our values, with our consciousness, and with our interest in mind, and vote against genocide, vote against militarization, vote against the continued destruction of our planet. And once we are able to do that and break through this narrative that has been imposed on us, this fear mongering, we will feel a little more free, and we will lose a little bit more of that fear, and we will continue to do what we need to do at the base with our people, building the confidence, building the power, and having the understanding that there is nothing in this country, nothing in this world that is produced without us. We have the power. And once we understand that, we fight for power, because that's also what this campaign is about. Fighting for the total and complete decision-making power in our social life, in our political life, and our economic life. Because not only do we need that, we deserve that, and we need and deserve it urgently. It needs to happen now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a really powerful point, which I couldn't agree with you more about fighting through this duopoly, is that it's not necessarily a cakewalk. It's not going to be easy. So kind of reminds me of a tradition that Muslims have with the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who has a hadith where he speaks specifically about fighting evil. Or how do you fight evil? What do you do when you see evil? So the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam instructs Muslims. He kind of gives three levels. And so it's interesting. He says, if you see evil, fight it with your hand. And if you cannot, then fight it with your tongue. So in other words, say something about it, be vocal. And if you cannot, then at least, and I'm paraphrasing here, change your heart or change your opinion about it. And then he makes the distinction to say, and that last one is a sign of those who are weakest in faith. So it's very interesting, kind of what you're talking about, which is if you see something, do something about it. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be the easy thing to do. So I couldn't agree more. I really appreciate your activism and your campaign. The platform of your campaign is amazing. We at Abandoned Biden absolutely, stand by a lot of your platform, which is very, there's obviously similarities between the other candidates, but you're right. I mean, as far as this unified part of the political spectrum is scaring the political establishment, which is a good thing. It means we're doing something right. So really appreciate that. And side note, I would have to say that all young people at the age of 13 need to be told it is cool to do what you did and be politically engaged. So hopefully other young people kind of learn from you and from your history. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you, Abdullah, for being in conversation with me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it back over to Sister Salima.
Thank you so much, Claudia, and thank you for your patience with the technical difficulties. That was not easy to manage, but you handle it so gracefully, and it says a lot about who you are in so many ways. We're going to move on to the second segment of our town hall with Dr. Cornel West. But before we bring on Dr. West, we would like to bring on the co-chair for Michigan, Sister Farah, to introduce herself and just share what she's been doing here in Michigan. Please, Sister Farah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Selena. Assalamu alaikum and peace and blessings be upon you all. I am the co-chair of Michigan, as Sister Selima told you all. So I just wanted to go over what we did in the primaries in February. So in the recent Michigan primaries, the notable presence of abandoned Biden and a significant number of uncommitted votes have shifted the political dynamics considerably. More than 100,000 Michiganders chose to vote for nobody rather than the incompetent president. In a battleground state where Biden won by fewer than 150,000 votes in 2020, the strength of this protest vote sent an ambiguous message. Abandoned Biden represents a faction of voters who have become disillusioned with President Joe Biden's genocidal behavior and are seeking to punish him by electing alternative presidential candidates. The substantial uncommitted vote indicated widespread anger, frustration, and resentment towards the current criminal and morally bankrupt Biden administration. This shift has injected a sense of unpredictability and competitiveness into the primaries, leading to a more open contest for candidates to enter the presidential race. Every vote contributes to shaping the political landscape. So it is crucial that we all vote, but we are committed to abandoning Biden and the likes of him. Anyone with favoring, aiding, and facilitating war crimes and genocidal mindset and associated with policies or actions we find morally unacceptable is off of our list. Voting is our power. By voting only, we can ensure the leaders who align with our values and reject such behavior are elected. I would like to share some more updates on our activities in Michigan. I have been actively supporting Dr. West's campaign in petitioning to get him on the ballot. I have visited the Wayne State University recently, the encampments, and we are supporting the brave students. We will continue to do so. We are also having a gala on June 30th, as Sister Salima has mentioned earlier. I would like folks to please register and join, and please, please, please donate generously, because this is the least we can do, right? We need to vote. We need to raise funds so we can fight this battle for all who cannot fight for themselves. With this, I would like to hand it over to our merchandise head for Biden. His name is Matt. Please, Brother Matt, take over. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name's Matt. I'm a merchandise organizer with Abandon Biden. And it's my honor tonight to introduce Dr. Cornel West, affectionately known to many as Brother West. Dr. West is the Dietrich Bonhoeffer Professor of Philosophy and Christian Practice at Union Theological Seminary. Although he has been active in electoral politics, most notably in support of the Bernie Sanders campaign, this is the first time he's personally running for office. He enters the 2024 presidential contest at a time in which he describes a nation crisis of moral bankruptcy and spiritual obscenity driven by derelict duopoly of both major parties who equally place profits over people and the planet. Dr. West asserts that running as an independent candidate affords him the opportunity and duty to deliver policy prescriptions incorporated by and for the people instead of political parties beholden to the corporations and special interest groups who feel no solidarity with the poor and working class people of all races, gender identities, and age groups. His campaign offers a real vision for the world that stands in opposition to oppressive forces and holds fast to the universal principles of truth, justice, and love. Tonight, Sister Safa will be leading the conversation with Dr. West, and we welcome you to join the conversations in the question and answer section. Sister Safa is a new addition to the Abandon Biden team. As an operations manager, she is a public defender for King County in Seattle, Washington. She advocates daily for her clients to be treated with humanity and has turned her attention since October 7th to advocating for a more just and humane foreign policy through work with the Uncommitted Movement, Abandon Biden, and volunteering with the Dr. West campaign. Sister Safa and Brother West, welcome.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum to everyone. Hi, Dr. West. Thank you for being here with us. And it is an honor for me to be interviewing you. Have you gotten your settings straight?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Indeed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, I want to start off with, if you can just kind of give us a introduction to yourself, but also include in there a few things that I think people are interested in, which is kind of what made you turn to politics. I know you've been in politics for quite some time, but more importantly, what led you into actually leading a political party and running for office yourself. I also would like if you could include in your story the beginning of your involvement in the Palestinian cause, because I know that goes back decades, and you knew Professor Edward Said very well.
Yes, but I'd first like to just thank you. I salute you. I salute my dear sister Farrakhan, the co-chair there in Michigan. You all are working so very, very hard, very much so. I want to thank Brother Mark as well, and I want to thank Brother Abdullah as well. And I think my magnificent running mate is here, Sister Melina, Dr. Abdullah, who has a long and rich history in the struggle for freedom on behalf of oppressed peoples all around the world, but beginning on the chocolate side with the Black Lives Matter movement. But for me, it's always been a question of trying to accent the moral and spiritual dimension of any struggle for freedom. Yeah, that I come out of a tradition that's deeply shaped by Martin Luther King Jr. on the one hand, Malcolm X on the other, Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker on the one hand, and artists, which mean very much to me, the Nina Simones and others on the other. And this was something that began very young for me, my dear sister, that we shut down Sacramento when I was 13 years old. That's when Martin Luther King Jr. was shot down like a dog on that porch in Memphis. And that was 1968. And you're absolutely right. By the time I went to college, I was working with the Black Panther Party, not a member of it because I was a Jesus-loving free Black man. They were atheistic and secular. So we had overlap, but I take Jesus with me everywhere I go. And therefore we work very closely together because we zeroed in on the least of these, the poor and the degraded and the subjugated. Working in prisons, I've been blessed to work in prisons for 51 years now, and we worked in the breakfast program as well. And you're absolutely right. By the time I went to Union Seminary, where I teach now, that was in 1977. I was 23 years old, and I met the towering Edward Said, and he and Noam Chomsky and Iqbal Amal, who was a Pakistani brother who was very close to Edward. We used to march in front of the New York Times just to get them to use the word occupation. And they thought that was anti-Semitic, and they thought back then, I mean, this is how sick and ridiculous the discourse has been for so very, very long. And so I've just tried to be constant. I've tried to be consistent in my moral witness and in my spiritual witness. And most importantly, you know, you try to be courageous. Because when you tell the truth, and the condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak, you're going to get so many lies coming at you. And the lies are just hiding the crimes. The crime has been in place for a long, long, long time. And that's in relation to not just the genocide right now taking place in Gaza, or the occupation, or the apartheid-like conditions or ethnic cleansing, but it's true in the United States as well. Anybody who tells the truth about the vicious legacy of white supremacy has to get ready to die. That's just, that's my tradition. That's where I come from. You see, that goes all the way back to the beginnings of the struggles against slavery, the struggles against neo-slavery, known as Jim and Jane Crow and so forth. So you're not surprised at that. You're not surprised by any form of evil. You're not paralyzed by despair. But at the same time, you have to be in solidarity with others. And so for me, it could be El Salvador, it could be South Africa. I'm blessed to work with Mandela and Bishop Tutu. We are now actually mourning the great James Morris Lawson Jr. I just had a radio show this morning, 95 years old. He was the brother who invited Martin Luther King Jr. to Memphis. He was pastor of the Methodist Church there. His students were Diane Nash and Marion Barry and John Lewis and James Bevel. We can go on and on and on. I've been very blessed in my life to meet some of the most magnificent freedom fighters of all colors. Disproportionately chocolate, though, but of all colors, because it's always embraces all, but it begins at home. It begins at home. And so who would have thought that we'd see this ripping of the veil with all of the lies about liberty and freedom, and we see genocide, and we see ethnic cleansing. It's been there for a long time. Zaid and others from 1979, when he wrote The Question of Palestine, he was making the same point. What does it take to rip off the veils and show the truth beneath the lies, and the lies hiding the crimes? Most importantly, I think we have to have a solidarity with each other, but we have to always accent the moral and the spiritual dimension of this thing. You see, I do not enter politics as a politician. I've been running for justice for 50 years. Just like
Dr. West, we did just get a question along those lines, and so I'm going to pose it to you here. The questioner was anonymous, but they say, unfortunately, young people have been leaving the church in droves in recent years. However, contrary to what one might think, the fastest growing group is not atheists, but rather those who believe in God but do not follow a particular religion. This seems to be directly related to the dominance of the political right in Christian spaces and religious spaces in general. What opportunity do you see in this for the religious left at large and the Christian left in particular? How pertinent is it for the left to recapture the church? And I will get to your running mate, Dr. Abdullah, who's a Muslim, and also draws heavily on her spiritual grounding in the Muslim faith.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. I appreciate the question. I don't know who it is, but I just thank you, my dear sister, for reading it, though. Because you see, when I talk about accenting the moral and the spiritual, it's in no way confined to institutional religion. Most institutional religion accommodates itself to empire and white supremacy and other forms of domination, you see, through predatory capitalist processes and so forth. And even as a secular person, Angela Davis is my dear sister. She's secular to the core, just like Huey Newton was, just like Bobby Seale was and still is. He's still living, God bless him. But they still have a moral and spiritual dimension to them. It's just that it's not tied to God talk. It's not tied to theism. It's not tied to a belief in God. But I do believe that in a moment in which organized greed and weaponized hatred and routinized indifference to the vulnerable is becoming so pervasive and predominant everywhere you look. And what does that do? It suffocates all forms of morality, all forms of spirituality. And it's just survival of the slickest, survival of the richest, survival of the most powerful. And that's nothing but gangsterization of the world. That's what gangsterization is. And one reason why Trump is so popular is because he's not just a sign and symbol, he enacts and embodies the highest levels of gangsterization. What do gangsters do? They say and do anything without accountability. They're tied to their own narcissism, their own sense of power, and the very notion of morality and spirituality is totally alien. And we're seeing that not just in his behavior, we're seeing that across the board. And that's a sign of an empire in profound spiritual decay and moral decadence. And we have to be able to reintroduce America to the best of itself. And for me, that begins with the Black freedom movement. It begins with the struggles against capitalism, white supremacy, and so forth. And especially the imperial tentacles of the larger hyper capitalist project that America is, or empire, let's just call it empire, as it were. So that I think it's really healthy when people see institutional religion selling out the forms of domination and leave, but still preserve their moral and spiritual dimensions.
Right. Yeah. Dr. West, can you speak just a little bit about your VP pick, Dr. Abdullah, and why you picked her as your vice presidential candidate?
Yeah, well, when I sat down and prayed and had wonderful conversations with my beloved wife, Anahita, we had reached the conclusion that we wanted a vice presidential candidate who would put a smile on the face of Fannie Lou Hamer and Martin King and Malcolm X and Ella Baker, ... You see, that's the criteria. That's what moral and spiritual greatness is. The courage and compassion and service to the least of these and willingness to pay a cost. And that she exemplifies that. She's been at this now for decades and decades. And as you know, the various attacks on her, the SWAT teams coming through her place every Wednesday for the last number of years. She's there to make sure that folk who have been brutalized by the police or families who are tied to the murder by the police are comforted, are supported. And see, that to me is the most important thing when it comes to politics, moral and spiritual greatness in the form of courage and compassion. And that's why it's just so sad. You got most of the politicians today who can't even mention the word ceasefire until the boss on the plantation says it. That's just a sign that they don't have a moral and spiritual connection to the suffering. It's just an intellectual strategy based on Machiavellian calculation.
Right. That's
the worst thing for me. It's just so sick for me. It really is.
That's one of the things that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, because we have been able to kind of galvanize to a certain extent. I mean, of course, the effectiveness of calling for a ceasefire, we haven't seen it, and it's been months. But if it's not coming from a moral and spiritual stance, then who's to say that a group of people who have even less support are not going to be the next ones in the crosshair? And if nobody's standing up for them, then it's just their lives are up for grabs, right? So it should be coming from a moral spiritual stance as opposed to popularity or coming from the top, or an order coming from the top down.
Absolutely.
One of the questions we've been getting a lot of questions about, unity amongst the left. I will read out a question that Drew Austin had written in. He said, Daruba bin Wahid and the Black Power media had issued a call to these three amazing candidates and the people to form a united front against fascism. I myself had watched that conversation of yourself on the Black Power Media platform. He said, let's form a unified movement, an independent Green Party for socialism and liberation. The PSL is the vanguard of the mind. Dr. Cornel West is the vanguard of the heart, and the Green Party is the vanguard of the body. We have to join forces and put PSL in the driver's seat, Cornel in the passenger seat as vice president, and use the Green Party's infrastructure and ballot access as the engine. He said we must leave behind traditional campaigns and form a revolutionary movement now before the unprecedented opportunity of 2024 goes to waste. I will say this, the question that I would like to ask here is, I understand that there is a popular belief that voting for third parties leads to, numerous times third party voting has been blamed for the Democratic Party losing the elections. And I think that is a misplaced belief, because there are many people who show up to vote third party that were otherwise just not going to vote, right? So third parties tend to galvanize people who are just perhaps not, we're just not even going to show up. So it's unfair to say that they're the ones who cost the Democratic Party or whatever, one of the major parties losing. However, amongst the left, it appears that there are loyalties that are a little bit more divided as far as wanting to see a united left ticket. And I think in this context, support for one is perhaps taking away a little bit from support for others. I know all three parties have been struggling to get onto all the state ballots. And that requires votes. It requires volunteers asking for those votes. My question is, what are your thoughts on splitting up the third party votes? And what was your thought process in leaving the Green Party to go independent, knowing that the Green Party was then going to have to field another candidate?
Yeah, appreciate the query there. One, Brother Daruba is somebody I have deep love and respect for. I'll go back almost 30 years with him. He put in those 19 years in captivity and incarceration as a political prisoner. And he and I have been in rich conversation since 1990. So when he made the call, I responded immediately, as you saw. And he and I might not agree on everything. We don't agree on God, but well, actually, when he was a member of the party, he was secular. He's a Muslim now, so he actually does believe in God. I want to take that back immediately. I just remember him early on. He was more secular, so I take that immediately. Thank God that Allah came in and had tremendous impact on my brother's life. But I do believe his call, as you know, is for a united front of the left. It's not so much for the campaigns themselves somehow marginalizing, but a united front from the left, so that we're able to be as strong as possible as we move prior to election, through the election, and beyond the election. I'm always open to a united front of the left that's based on both principle as well as integrity. You're always going to have people on the left that you have not only disagreements with, but there's folk on the left as well that you begin to lose respect for, because once you see them up close, you recognize, oh, lo and behold, they're not trustworthy, they're not reliable, and so forth and so on. And that was my experience in the Green Party. There's some wonderful people in the Green Party. There's some wonderful individuals in the Green Party. But I became thoroughly convinced that what was asked of me was commitment to a Green Party rather than the movement and the people. For internal debates, for example, that would have taken so much time given limited resources. And then even when we go out and get the votes, it was still very difficult to get the petitions. It was difficult to transfer it to the campaign from the party. So I began to see, no, things are too tight. I'm beginning to feel like a jazz man in a military band. A military band, you got orders from the top. Well, no, that's me. I'm not on anybody's plantation, no matter what the party is. That I've got to be able to be myself across the board. And that means being honest and candid about making connections between critiques of capitalism and critiques of white supremacy. And I make white supremacy very, very crucial and central to my campaign. And we don't have a party in America that makes white supremacy a central issue as it relates to capitalism and imperialism. We just don't. We got anti-racists in all those parties. I mean, Sister Claudia is strong anti-racist. Green Party got anti-racist, no doubt. But white supremacy is something that sits at the center of what I talk about because that's my tradition. That's where I come from. That's what King and Malcolm were all about. That's what Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker were all about. And therefore, when I look at Gaza and say on television or on radio, it's settler colonialism. Absolutely. No doubt about that. It's the British Empire making the shift to creating this state, and then the American Empire coming in to facilitate its occupation, and now having Biden as war criminal, as genocide denier, as genocide enabler. But at the same time, I accent the white supremacist dimension of it. Everybody knows if those were Europeans, if those were Israelis, there'd be a qualitatively different response around the world. And so we had to be very honest about that. We had to be candid about that. And that's something that I will always do. And therefore, I'm able to do that much easily as someone who's running, as an independent candidate rather than tied to a particular party.
There's a question about your position on the US-NATO proxy war in Ukraine. Can you wrap that up in a response as well to kind of tying that into the US funding of Israel and the Israeli military, and your just position on foreign policy and military spending?
Well, I say over and over again, I'm running to head the U.S. empire in order to dismantle the empire. Talking about the 1,800 military units around the world, 130 special operations in countries around the world. And therefore, I'm deeply, deeply critical of American hegemony. NATO has been an extension of American hegemony. Russia itself was promised that there would not be 1 inch budged in NATO. That's what they told Gorbachev. Now, country after country after country, almost 31. Now they're on the border. Well, that's provocative. There's no country or empire that will have on their border an enemy country with missiles from their major adversary. If there were Russian missiles or Chinese missiles in Mexico or in Canada, you could rest be assured the United States would blow them to smithereens overnight, just like we saw in 1962 with the missile crisis in Cuba. And so that I view that as provocative. So NATO itself an extension of American hegemony. So I want to bring that war to a close through diplomatic processes, acknowledging that Russia's a wounded empire. There's no doubt about that. And Russia has its own forms of domination and repression and so forth and so on. I'm not a fan of Putin at all. Not at all. I think he's a gangster in a lot of different ways. But he's also running an empire, a wounded empire, where he has to have some kind of security. And as long as it's provocative, then we're headed toward World War III in terms of nuclear exchange. And that is something that that Biden represents in a very, very ugly way. And it would be the same way in terms of, Taiwan with China, and of course in the Middle East, ending the siege, ending the occupation, and trying to ensure that Palestinians can live a life of equality and dignity.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. West, I did want to give you a, maybe we can keep this under, if you can keep your response to 90 seconds or 60 seconds or
Sure.
so.
And you just kind of
For
give me a little sign so I can follow
That's all
through.
right. Okay, I will.
I
will.
appreciate it.
Just for you to
Appreciate it.
give some closing remarks, the last co-host had asked about closing argument, and because I'm a public defender, I also appreciate a good closing argument. So if you want to give that to us in 60 to 90 seconds.
Oh, well, no, I just believe, in fact, that we're at a historical moment, an unprecedented historical moment where some serious truth telling and justice seeking can take place. And it has to be, I think, by peoples whose voices have a power rooted in a heart and soul based on a longevity of constancy and consistency in speaking on behalf of those Franz Fanon called the wretched of the earth. And there's no doubt that what we've tried to do, I announced now a year ago, and we are on the ascent. You know, we got the 7 states. We're going to be having more states in the coming weeks. It's going to shake things up in a fundamental way. I'm convinced that Biden himself is not even going to be the candidate. I think he's going to drop out. I think he's running out of gas. It's very clear. More and more, we see evidence that he doesn't have both paddles in the water. A certain kind of decline is setting in, a cognitive decline. And there's a chance that the gangster Trump himself could be on the way to jail. So we just don't know. This is in real time, but we have to bear witness and be a witness. That's the important thing. Now, is that within the time limit though?
I think that is just perfect. Thank you
Okay.
so much, Dr. West. We really appreciate your decades of advocacy for who you just mentioned, and Franz Fanon calls the wretched of the earth. I really appreciate it on behalf of my clients that I represent, and on behalf of everyone here.
But I salute each and every one of you. Stay strong in what you're doing. And we end this in the long run, faithful unto death, in solidarity with our precious Palestinian brothers now and forever and a day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, though.
Thank you so much, Dr. West, for your time, and Safa for your discussion with Dr. West. It's absolutely amazing to have these candidates together on this platform, and we're trying our best. We had close to 600 participants, and we're around 535 right now. So there's a lot of questions coming in, and our team is trying to take these questions and pull what's coming out and keep the conversation interesting. So we hope that we're fulfilling your expectations and everyone is benefiting from this conversation. So thank you all so much. We are going to now jump into our last portion of the town hall with Dr. Stein. But before we have her come on, we're going to have the co-chair of North Carolina speak a little bit about himself and what he's been doing in North Carolina. Thank you so much. Puyan, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Puyan Orduwadi. I'm an immigration and criminal defense attorney here in North Carolina. I started to get involved into third-party politics when I worked with another attorney from the Center for Competitive Democracy to sue the State Board of Elections to get the Green Party on the ballot. We were successful in doing so. And then I joined Abandon Biden in November. And starting in February of this year, we started to get reports of just a handful of students who were being arrested for protesting on their own campuses. They were being charged with trespass. They had to go through disciplinary hearings. So we stepped in and represented them. We were also successful in doing that. There was a large encampment at UNC towards the end of April. I visited the encampment a few times. I spoke with some of the students just to advise them of their legal rights. And then unfortunately, one early morning, multiple police departments raided the encampment. The university chancellor actually asked the Chapel Hill Police Department, where the university was located, to raid the encampment, and they refused, so they had to bring in multiple police departments outside of Chapel Hill. 38 students were arrested that day. And when I saw the videos of the arrest, I was very, very shocked. We saw police officers dragging young women by the hair several feet. We saw police officers knocking down students in wheelchairs and stomping on them. We saw faculty from UNC assaulting students as well, which was quite shocking. A few other students were also arrested in the subsequent days. So there was a total of about 44 students right now who are arrested and who've had to go through disciplinary hearings. Some of them have had their graduations deferred for an entire year. Some of them are suspended. Some of the disciplinary hearings are still pending. Abandon Biden and 3 other attorneys, some from the Muslim Bar Association and some from other groups, have all stepped up, and we've been representing them for the last month or so. None of the criminal cases are closed yet. What was very odd is that when I went back to UNC to just try and gather a little bit of evidence for their cases, we saw, I guess, 8 or 10 foot high fencing all around any grassy areas around campus. We saw what I can only really describe as an armored vehicle patrolling up and down the streets of UNC. And it just really cemented the fact of how repressive the state is towards their own students. We've had local city councilmen step up to write letters in support of the students. We've had the mayor step up to try and support the students. However, all of their cases are still ongoing, but we're committed to representing them until the very end. I'm completely shocked, and I have just so much admiration for these students who still to this day really refuse to back down. I think we have a lot to learn from them. But that's all I wanted to say, and I guess I'll pass it back to Sister Salim.
Thank you so much. We are going to have Sister Sadia, who's the co-chair of Minnesota, join us for the interview with Dr. Stein. If you could, she is here, Sadia's here.
I am here.
Okay, there you go.
Brother Mark is going to introduce.
Yes.
No, oh, introduce, yes, go ahead.
Go ahead,
Yes.
brother.
Thank you so much, everybody. And I'm the co-chair here in North Carolina for Abandon Biden campaign. And North Carolina is also a very important state for this coming election because our numbers here in North Carolina as Muslim only 130,661, and last election was decided by only about 74,000 vote. During the primary, actually, we were able to have no preference for the primary, 81,000 vote. So that's more than half of our Muslim population, because we joined venture with other minorities, because unity is powerful. Now I would love to actually welcome Dr. Stein to our panelist here. Me and Dr. Stein, actually, we've been working across the states, helping her everywhere in each state just to secure her name on the ballot. I have some small short introduction, doesn't actually give everything about her. Dr. Jill Stein is a transformative figure in American politics, leading a powerful movement for profound change. With Harvard education and a well-known career as a physician, Dr. Stein brings exceptional expertise and unwavering passion to her mission for healthier and more just society. As a fearless advocate for environmental sustainability, social justice, and progressive reform, she has captured the hearts and mind of millions. A 2-time Green Party presidential candidate, Dr. Stein boldly challenged the political status quo, offering visionary solution of the most passionate issue that we are currently facing. Her unwavering dedication to universal healthcare, climate action, and economic equality stand as beacon of hope for the bright future. Dr. Stein determined pursuit of peace, human rights, and livable planet for the inspired growing movement that exceed conventional politics. In a bold demonstration of her commitment to justice, Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein was among more than 100 people arrested during protests in Washington State, in Washington University campus in St. Louis, Missouri, standing in solidarity with the incumbent student for Palestine. Her brave action underscore her deep belief and willingness to fight for the oppressed. The Green Party is the only party that does not accept donation from corporate America, lobbyists, and PACs, following the strict rules and regulation. Dr. Stein movement is powered by grassroots support, with 100% of her funding coming directly from people like you and me. This ensures her campaigns serve only the people, not a special interest group. It is party from the people for the people. Dr. Stein campaign as well, campaign manager are on the ground with 100 grassroots movement, tirelessly working to secure her name on the ballot from state to state. Her campaign has gathered massive support from women, students, Muslim, Arabs, and many others who are rallying behind her vision for better America. In New York, despite the Democrat Party effort to triple the required number of petitions, signature from 15,000 to 45,000, Dr. Stein campaign collected impressive 42,000 signatures, just 3,000 shy of the new requirement. If the Democrat Party had not imposed this tripling, she would have easily secured her spot on the ballot. In a stark contrast, other candidates managed to only gather less than 4,000 signatures in New York, and the independent candidate collected only 3,000. This remarkable effort clearly shows that Dr. Stein is on the right path to victory, capturing more hearts and votes across the state where petitions are required. She offered the choice that America are looking for. Dr. Stein also further demonstrate and her consideration of Dearborn, Michigan Mayor Abdullah Hammoud, who would have been the first Arab Muslim running mate as her vice president on the ticket. Unfortunately, due to his age, just 3 months younger than the required age for such a position. This was not possible for such a position. This was not possible for her to commit, or for him to commit for this position. This choice reflects the dedication ensuring that her cabinet is engaged directly with our Muslim community and culture. Join Dr. Jill Stein and her mission to reshape our nation and create a government that truly serves the people. Her dynamic leadership and its transformative vision are exactly what we need to build more sustainable, equitable, and suitable world for our future and kids. Without further ado, I welcome Dr. Stein to our town hall.
To Sadia, please, first. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Mark, for the wonderful introduction. Dr. Stein, thank you so much for taking the time. I will give a brief introduction of myself, and we will be very happy to have a conversation with you. I am Sadia Tarnum. I'm one of the co-chairs of Minnesota. I've been involved in the Abandon Biden campaign since the inception, since the very first press conference that we did back in October when President Biden announced that he was coming to visit Minnesota on November 1st. So that was the very first press conference that we did for Abandon Biden. that we asked him for a permanent ceasefire, which there was no results, unfortunately, and then we announced the Abandon Biden campaign. I'm also on the board for Abandon Biden organization. And apart from the 3 nonprofits that I'm working on, I'm also working on creating a Muslim lobby group in the Midwest, inshallah, because we all know that it is the very big need of the hour to unseat Biden and remove him from the White House, but also work on the future and the long term too, to make sure that all the minority communities have a voice. Our community have long been committed to upholding the values of justice, equality, and compassion. We have advocated tirelessly for the rights and well-being of all the people, regardless of race, religion, or any background. We have supported, most of us have supported President Biden and the Democratic Party in the past elections, and particularly in 2020 election. With many of the swing states, he won by a very small margin, which equated to the Muslim population in those swing states. And yet President Biden's refusal to call for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza and his continued unwavering support to a genocide has left, have left us outraged. When innocent lives hang in the balance, silence becomes complicity. That's why it's very important for all of us to stand for this movement and how important this campaign is for us. Dr. Stein, we met a few months ago in Minnesota, and that was a wonderful conversation that we had. And I'm very happy to continue that conversation. If you can do a brief introduction of yourself and talk about what encouraged you to, or what pushed you to going into politics, because you have a wonderful career as a physician. But what was it that kind of pushed you into the political career? If you can do your introduction and talk about that, that would be wonderful.
Great. Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here. Thank you for your wonderful introduction, and likewise to Mark Albarno. It has been such a joy and an inspiration to work with Abandon Biden across the country, and I must say with the wider Muslim community as well, but especially with Abandon Biden. I have to give you so much respect and gratitude because what you're doing is not only for the survival and the welfare of the Arab American and the Muslim American community, but I think for all Americans, because you are standing up for our highest values. You have incredible courage to really confront the fundamental corruption of our political system, which is really captured by empire in a way that Gaza is the, really kind of the essential and just tragic example of. But the problem is not limited to Gaza. It's not limited to Palestine. As we all know, this is such a big problem. And I have so much gratitude and respect, because I see so many people galvanized by the example of the Muslim community and the Arab American community, who are standing up for our shared values and are not being intimidated by the propaganda and the human rights violations and the civil liberty violations and all that from our campuses, to our cities and towns. You're courageous. Your courage is courageous, and all of America is benefiting from that just immeasurably. I describe myself as a mother on fire, working to make the world safe for our children, for all of our children. And I have to go back to my upbringing in the shadow of the Holocaust. I grew up just after the Second World War in a Jewish community, in a Jewish family, attending a Reform synagogue, attending religious school on a weekly basis until my early teen years. And, I was really part of the effort to come to terms with genocide that had been committed, not only against Jews. There have been many genocides, but this was a particularly horrible and visible one against the Jews during the Second World War. And it was a major focus of the Jewish community was to try to understand how could people do this to each other. And what I learned, and really how our community came to terms with this, was to understand really and to commit that genocide must never be allowed to happen again, not to anyone, not only to Jews, but to everyone. Genocide is not okay. And genocide is the responsibility not only of the perpetrators, but also the bystanders. And that really informed my upbringing and my commitments as I grew in my teen years and into adulthood, that I really became a social activist deep in my bones. I never thought I would be witnessing a genocide, in front of our very eyes, but I really wanted to be a part of that social activism that does not tolerate the abuse of human rights, and that stands up for the struggles of human rights and civil liberties, and for justice and sustainability. That was my work. I became a medical doctor, and what I discovered in the clinic is that you cannot really create health in the clinic, that by the time people come in with illnesses, it's not so easy to fix them. An ounce of prevention is worth a ton of cure. And we need to address the upstream drivers. And what I discovered in working with community groups around issues from housing to our healthcare system, homelessness, jobs, et cetera, pollution in particular, and I might add war and poverty, the major drivers of illness, are profoundly anchored in our communities and public policy. And I kept finding that our government was not on the side of the people in need of justice and struggling for justice. And so often we would be fighting big, powerful special interests aligned with our government. And I then transitioned from clinical medicine to what I call political medicine, because politics is very much the mother of all illnesses. Again, from poverty to pollution to food deserts to joblessness, we need to address the political roots of these problems in order to fix what is actually killing us. So that's largely how I came to be here. I moved from this political medicine into actually running for office shortly after Ralph Nader's campaign in the year 2000, where I witnessed what a transformational difference his campaign was. He ran as a Green in a different kind of politics, which is not bought and paid for, and in which people can actually begin to have really human heart-to-heart conversations and engage the best of humanity in the effort to solve our problems.
Thank you so much. I think you're absolutely right. Our country does need healing at a very root level. So that absolutely makes sense. Last I counted, I think you were on the state on 21 states, on the ballot for 21 states. And a lot of questions are coming in that what are you doing, or how you anticipate to being on how many states or ballots? And a question from Yvonne Colton is, can we expose how both Republicans and distinguishedly even Democrats have been actively suppressing third-party ballots access with hostility? I think this needs to be exposed because a lot of in both the parties, now I'm paraphrasing, that both the parties are going out of the way with hostility and trying to suppress the third party and independent party candidates and not making them not making them on the ballot. So what have you faced, and what are you working on to make sure that you are on the maximum number of states and the ballots of the maximum number of states? And by the end of the deadline, how many states do you anticipate to be on?
So we do anticipate being on all the ballots. And while we are involved in a very intensive battle in New York, in fact, I was just at a virtual hearing with the Board of Elections in New York, because we are going to fight this. The law is illegitimate. It tripled the required number of signatures without a justification for doing that. It also, New York State changed the laws, the Democratic Party changed the laws basically in secret without the knowledge of the public, essentially denying voters what the voters are clamoring for right now, which is the freedom to actually choose who to vote for and not just have these two candidates who are both creatures of the war machine and Wall Street, to have them rammed down our throats. People are clamoring for other choices. And as we are doing that, New York State just shut down our choices. And because of these draconian rules requiring 45,000 signatures in 6 weeks, which is really the most difficult of all the states, because of these very difficult requirements, only 3 candidates will be on the presidential ballot. And that is the least of any of the states. So they have really restricted voter choice here through these draconian measures. So we are going to be fighting that in court. But as was mentioned earlier by Mark Albarno, that our campaign, and I credit this very much to the anti-genocide surge, particularly Muslim Americans, Arab Americans, and African Americans as well, but especially it's the Muslim and Arab American community that really came out in droves, so that we had an explosion in our campaign and achieved actually 42,000 signatures. All the other campaigns, except for Robert Kennedy, who has basically billionaire funding. So I kind of put him not in a grassroots category. He's more in the machine politics category. But among everyday people-powered campaigns, the most that anybody got was about 4,000. Even the libertarians who've always gotten onto every ballot on every state in the past 2 presidential cycles, they've been on 50 ballots, they only got 4,000. But we, powered by the anti-genocide movement, got to 42,000. So it was really a staggering development that demonstrated the power, the political power of this community to really transform our politics. And I just want to add that we are working right now to be in court and speaking with various lawyers and deciding what kind of case we are going to fight, because there are many issues here on which we can fight. But if we don't overturn this law, we will still be on the ballot through a write-in campaign. And because this movement is so supercharged, it is possible even to have successful write-in campaigns. Joe Biden just ran a write-in campaign in the state of New Hampshire and achieved 90% of the vote. So if you're organized and if you're impassioned, you can win. And I'll just say briefly, the Democratic Party announced back in March, and it was written up in the New York Times, that they hired an army of lawyers in order to nitpick us off the ballot. Sometimes it's called lawfare, abusing the law basically for political purposes to try to throw people off the ballot. We just had a case filed against us in Nevada today, where the Democrats are trying to throw us off the ballot. In Nevada, where we already achieved ballot status, getting 3 times the number of required signatures. We got 30,000, 10,000 were required. So we will be fighting that as well. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that the Democrats were actually caught red-handed advertising for infiltrators, to hire infiltrators to try to disrupt our campaigns and our ballot access battles. So they are quaking in their boots. They are fearful because we have emerged really as the giant among the grassroots campaigns, empowered and really inspired by the anti-genocide constituents who will not allow this this genocide to be conducted on our watch. And the bottom line is that to fight these battles, we have to raise money. And I apologize. That's why I've had to juggle my time tonight, because we're currently fighting for ballot status in Illinois and Indiana, which both have simultaneous and very short deadlines. We have to get 100,000 signatures in the next 2 weeks, and we have to raise the money to do that. So we have a fundraiser going on tonight, and almost every day we have fundraising activities going on. So I apologize. That's why I've had to juggle my time here tonight. But we are fighting, and we are inspired very much in this fight by the need to shut down this genocide. And by getting on the ballot, we are firing a shot across the bow of the empire. They know that we are coming, their days are numbered, and the American people have the power of our convictions and our vision, and we will not allow this genocide to go down on our watch. We are working to stop this in its tracks as soon as possible, and political resistance is absolutely critical. Whether we go all the way to the White House or we simply get to 5 or 10%, we then become a real force to contend with, and we show that we are not going to go quietly into this night.
You don't have to apologize, Dr. Stein. We know that how hard you're working, and we absolutely have full gratitude that you spared this time to talk to us. So thank you so much. So please don't apologize. This is a very busy time for you. We completely understand. And to that comment, when they're coming at full force to you, then you know that you're doing something right, because that's exactly when they're targeting you. So I'm sure that you are doing something right. I have a question about the lobby groups. I know that, American political system, unfortunately, is very much influenced by the big lobby groups, right? The insurance companies and the big pharma and all these big lobby groups. I mean, not just that, but now we are seeing more and more the foreign country lobby groups, so the APAC, how much they influence our political system, how much, even US going and vetoing ceasefire resolution. I mean, it's down to the very basic human rights. We are not just at the national level, but at the international level, how US is being influenced by these foreign lobby groups. I mean, and if and when, if you become or get elected, not just you not taking the money from APAC, how do you think that we can combat these influences from the foreign country lobby groups and foreign influences? How can we clean out our system?
So APAC, for starters, needs to be classified as a foreign agent, which actually John F. Kennedy was intending to do before he was assassinated, the predecessor of APAC. And APAC should be classified as a foreign agent, and then their power to bribe our elected officials is essentially over. But our system needs a house cleaning. It is extremely corrupt. We have the best democracy that money can buy. One of the Supreme Court justices from an earlier era, Justice Louis Brandeis, had a quote that in this country, we have a choice between a democracy or vast concentrations of wealth. We have vast concentrations of wealth, which basically then enables wealth to buy policy. And this is what the big corporate players that you previously named can do. And we would include in that, of course, the war profiteers and the weapons industry. And they not only buy influence through campaign contributions and lobbyists, but also through the revolving door, that you have people like our Secretary of the Department of Defense, who moved from, I don't know if it was Raytheon, I think it was Raytheon, he moved from the Raytheon Board of Directors into being the Secretary of Defense, where he's supposedly, overseeing the corporation, where he has enormous financial ties. So we need to clean up all of that, including by getting big money out of politics. And there are many ways that that can be done. In my home state, in Massachusetts, I was part of a coalition that passed campaign finance reform, the so-called clean elections law, which enables public funding as an alternative to candidates having to go on bended knee to billionaires and bankers and big corporations and then owe them a debt of gratitude. A public funding system allows us to get the big money out and put the people back in. We passed it through a large coalition, which is what I've been working on in my political life, is to help build coalitions that can actually get work done, to move legislation, change regulation, and so on. And we did that. And after we had passed the law by voter referendum by a huge margin, because people want to get the politics, the corruption and the big money out of our politics, we passed it by a huge margin, 2-1. And what happened? The progressive so-called Democratic Party in Massachusetts repealed the law on a voice vote. But, that is the possibility is still there. And if we have a strong coalition, we can pass reforms, and not only pass them, but then continue to watchdog them, and also to remove from office the corrupt politicians who basically dismantle our reforms. So it requires a long-term mobilization. It requires a lot of coalition building across issues and across political movements, but we can do this. This is the power of democracy, which is essential to our campaign, and which we are seeing in our ballot drives. And by the way, we are now at 24 states, and in fact, we now have enough electoral college votes that we would be classified as a campaign that actually can win the election. We now have the majority of electoral college votes, some 274, and more than that actually within our purview. So there are some debates that use that as as criteria for inclusion. So, we intend to use that to try to fight our way into debates, because we are now a campaign that is on the ballot in enough states for enough voters that we have the potential actually to win this election.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful news. Thank you. I have a question from attendee who's anonymous. Now that you've just recognized that the amount of Arab Americans and Muslim Americans that are supporting you, are you going to stop sending countries our own tax money? Not just, I'm sure it's not just Arab Americans and Muslim Americans, it's the tax money for all Americans, for all citizens have this question, right? Why are we funding so many proxy wars and so many wars in general? You mentioned sending less, but how is it justified? Why is our money that we work so hard being sent somewhere else?
Well, it's actually against the law. It's against the law here in the United States to send money to those who are violating human rights, those who are interfering with the delivery of humanitarian aid, and those who are violating nuclear treaties. And Israel counts on all three scores. Israel is violating all three. Saudi Arabia is violating, at least one. So, we can stop delivering military aid. It's not only the abuse of our tax dollars, but it's also the instigation of war and conflict all over the world. And the U.S. is the major exporter of weapons around the world, both small and large, and this causes chaos around the world. And it's not only the export of weapons, it's also the use of our military around the world. According to the Congressional Research Service, in fact, the U.S. has sent our troops into other countries 250 times in just the last 3 decades. So the problem here is a core problem that our foreign policy is basically that of an empire. And the US considers itself, the unipolar dominant force throughout the world. But the world is no longer that way. That was kind of the post-World War II world. We are now a multipolar world, and there are other countries, who actually have greater GDP and greater combined economic power than what the US and NATO has. So we are no longer in a position to be the bully in the schoolyard around the world. So there are many ways in which we can change this. We need to change our foreign policy. The president has enormous latitude over what our foreign policy is. And, we can stop the worst abuses in terms of sending our tax dollars right now by not only ending the flow of weapons, but also ending the interference of US troops in other countries. So the US has enormous power to rein in those tax dollars, because this foreign policy based on military might rather than it needs to be international law, human rights, and diplomacy. That should be the basis of foreign policy. But we've got one based on military might. That is impoverishing us in this country. It spends down half of our congressional budget is spent on basically endless wars that are making us endangered. They are not making us safer. They're endangering the whole world. So it's both impoverishing us and endangering all of humanity. So there is a better way forward. And also, let me add, when you're in the White House, you then have the bully pulpit. you have the bully pulpit. And the things that we're talking about are the things that the American people are absolutely clamoring for. Polls show over and over again, like in Gaza, for example, the Americans want an immediate diplomatic solution and a ceasefire. Likewise, in Ukraine, Americans do not support, the squandering of hundreds of billions of dollars in a war that cannot be won through a war. We need a peace process in Ukraine, in the same way that we need diplomacy and international law to stop the genocide, the ethnic cleansing, the apartheid, and the occupation of Israel in Palestine. So there are ways we can solve these problems that will be supported by the American people, and which will leave which will help create an America and a world that works for all of us.
That's absolutely right. And I think not just a ceasefire, that needs to be a permanent ceasefire, but not just that, right? It's occupation since past 75 years, it's apartheid since past 75 years. So all of that need to be addressed. And yes, the Ukraine war needs to be stopped with diplomacy. It's not just, a proxy war that I don't think that can be won by either sides. So that we are just spending, and so many people are dying. But to follow up on that, though, I think now more than ever in any of the elections, I have been campaigning, and many of the people who are part of this campaign and who are co-chairs, who are wonderfully working and organizing and spending countless hours, we have seen a new renewed interest in so much enthusiasm, right? In the working class, in the students, on campuses and everywhere, to just go out and campaign for people to be motivated to support candidates, and more than any other elections that we've seen before. So at least we are motivated that I think we can get rid of this two-party system that both of the parties are unfortunately sold into the big corporates. But again, the three great parties that there are, the three independent parties, they're kind of divided. So that makes a very good chance that all of these people who are very motivated, who are very involved in the politics, they are getting divided. The student body and even the working class and everybody, they're getting divided. What do you think that it's a possibility that you would ever think of a collaboration to combine these forces to have a very viable option or feasibility to unseat either of the parties and have a third party be in the White House? What do you think is an option, or would you ever be open for that?
Absolutely. And actually, in the Green Party, we have worked for decades, in fact, to build coalitions across the people-powered parties, that is, the parties that don't take big money and corrupt bribes and things like that. So, across the socialist and the democratic socialist parties, and Greens, and I think Working Families was in it at one point as well. But we actually had a group called Left Elect that was working to basically develop common goals and common work with the idea that we need to unify, we need to avoid the divide and conquer situation. So absolutely. And I myself have been very involved in reaching out to other parties and other campaigns to basically build solidarity and try to show support. But I want to point out one thing in this race that will be unifying, because at the end of the day, while there are several small progressive parties and several small progressive voices, we are the only one that will actually be on the ballot across the country. So most voters will find themselves without a progressive option, except for our campaign. So there will be 3 pro-genocide, pro-war candidates, Trump, Biden, and RFK, who will be splitting the pro-war vote. So they could be dividing the vote and bringing their count down, whereas our campaign will be unifying the pro-worker, anti-war, anti-genocide, climate emergency, anti-student debt, healthcare as a human right, affordable housing, rent control, all those issues that have huge constituents. We will be the only one. So it's entirely possible in that kind of setting where you have 3 pro-war, pro-genocide candidates and 1 anti-war, anti-genocide, you can see the potential for the anti-genocide campaign to actually win. It only takes 26% of the vote to actually win in that kind of setting. So it's entirely possible for us to come out of this election unified, because the ballot access system is such that it creates a filter. Only one of us is going to get through that filter. It's a struggle for everyone, but we're the only ones that are actually on track now, and that, you know, have ballot access now for the majority of electoral votes across
Do you
the
think
nation.
it would divide the vote in some of the states that all three, the Independent Party, Claudia de Cruz, and you, all of you will be on the ballot in some of the states? I think there's about 12 states that I think it's supposed to be. So then do you think that states, it might divide the vote for the more progressives?
That is a possibility in those states where we are all on the ballot. And that'll be a really important time, I think, for progressives to do some real soul searching about how do we challenge empire here? Because you're not going to challenge empire by winning, you know, 10 or 12 states that are going to have a small electoral college vote. You know, the only option we have to win is to basically consolidate behind a campaign that's actually challenging empire across the country. So it's going to be a very important dialogue at that point. What is our goal here? Is our goal to stop genocide? If we win the White House, genocide is over. Is our goal to actually stop genocide, or is it to build our own parties? And, you know, I didn't get into this race to insert myself into this campaign. We worked to recruit, you know, another candidate who then decided for, you know, their own comfort reasons, there were reasons to run solo, which I totally understand and respect. But we would be willing to make that, you know, to cast that vote to stop this genocide. You know, I can say that we have been kind of team players often in the past. In fact, our party, the Green Party, has different affiliates all around the country. In my home state in Massachusetts, our party is a merger of the Black Panthers Party, called the Rainbow Coalition, and the Green Party. So in Massachusetts, our affiliate is called the Green Rainbow Party. In West Virginia, it's the Mountain Party. And we just had dialogue in Kentucky, where there's been, shall we say, not a strong Green Party, and there may be another party emerging. We have been very open to building coalitions among parties, which is what we must do. And, you know, I think we must be prepared to consolidate here our forces, you know, and this is what the gentleman from the Black Panthers is initiating right now, what he calls a united front against fascism. This is a state of emergency that we're in. I have absolutely no doubt. And, you know, my view is that we can't wait until after the election. We can't wait until after the election. We need to start now to seize the moment. This election is a huge tipping point. The American people are done being thrown under the bus. You know, I think there's no more important time than right now for us to use our resources that we have right now, including our access to the ballot, to actually challenge empire and stop genocide in its tracks, and to, you know, demand that we have an America and a world that's going to work for all of us, because we are in a state of meltdown right now. Not only genocide, you can see that genocide really as a symbol right now of our world and what is happening with US militarism and empire, the wars that are raging around the world, the other genocides that are raging around the world as well, the assault on human rights, the climate, which is in utter meltdown, 126 degrees, both in Mexico now and in India. You know, we are not in a sustainable place right now, you know, and the economy is a disaster in many areas around the world, including in the US, where 63% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And half of all people who are renting their homes right now, or their apartments, are severely economically stressed, just trying to avoid being evicted. Over half of renters are basically one check from eviction, one paycheck from eviction. So we are in a state of emergency. And in my view, we need to pull out all the stops right now to have as unified practical and strategic a movement as we possibly can. And I apologize. I'm getting
No, you are.
at my door. Telling me.
I'm getting the messages too. I will just ask you to do some concluding remarks, if you can include. What do you see Palestine's future not beyond ceasefire? Of course, hopefully we will get a ceasefire soon, but beyond ceasefire, if you can do a brief closing argument, what you see Palestine's future, and also how can people help you?
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but your right-hand man, Jason, is asking me to ask you to sign off, Dr. Stein. Thank you so much for your excellent, your time with us and accommodating us with your busy schedule. I'm sorry to interrupt, but thank you so much. You have to get going.
And I'll just sign off saying that Palestine must be free from the river to the sea, and that we must stand strong for a Palestinian sovereignty. And there are now over 140 nations in the UN. The vast majority of all nations in the UN, and now increasingly Western nations as well, who are affirming Palestinian sovereignty and their right to all the security and the benefits and respect and dignity that a sovereign nation must have. And we must bring that about as quickly as possible, which we can do in this election by running as strong and unified as we can. This is a shot across the bow of empire and a strong stand for Palestinian sovereignty.
Okay.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye now.
Thank you all to our participants. Before you guys sign off, please, please let us remind you of some important things. We do have that exit poll that we would love for you all to answer now that you have heard all the candidates, and they're sharing that in the chat right now. I just wanted to also make a note that Abandon Biden has not yet made an endorsement for any candidate. We are in the process of, we've conducted our own interviews and asked our questions. We've now had a town hall with the community. We do want to also have on Sunday, June 23rd, an opportunity for you all to give us your input about who we should endorse and why, and if we should endorse, or what's your feedback on what we need to do for November. So that's on Sunday, June 23rd, and they are going to provide it in the chat, the link, so that you can register for that webinar. So I just wanted to make that announcement. And all of our candidates today do not accept any money from PACs or from corporations, and they've all been, as you can hear, supporters of a free Palestine. I also want to just now let a few more of our co-chairs from Arizona and Wisconsin speak a little bit about what they're doing, so that you all have an opportunity to hear from those states as we've showcased our different leaders in the different swing states. And we hope that you will join us as volunteers. I will now pass it on to Mark and Nidal and Brother Hazem. Thank you so much.